Jacob's Well is a limestone cave system in Texas that ends in total darkness. In January 2024, hydrologist Dr. Marcus Gary guided a custom-built, pressurized drone down into the tightest chamber of the system. Most people assume this flooded tunnel is just an empty, dead-end rock formation. Hit subscribe now, you will want to see where this leads. The high-resolution lens captured a carved limestone wall 900 feet below the surface. A message remains down there. The surface of the well looks like a peaceful swimming hole. It measures 12 feet across. Cold water flows from the Trinity Aquifer, an underground water system that stretches across thousands of square miles. For centuries, people viewed this spot as a simple, bottomless pit. Local legends claimed it had no floor. Modern science proved that wrong, but the reality is more unsettling than the myth. This is not French history. This is 100 years of unbroken documented record. Geologists began mapping the system in 1974. They found 4 distinct chambers carved out of ancient limestone. The first chamber drops 30 feet straight down. Then it angles into a slope that reaches 55 feet. The second chamber narrows into a tight chimney that drops to 80 feet. Here, the water pressure increases significantly. A false chimney traps divers, who mistake it for the exit. The third chamber consists of loose gravel and unstable silt. One wrong move with a swim fin blinds a diver instantly. The fourth chamber is the tightest. It is a narrow slit that requires divers to remove their oxygen tanks just to squeeze through. Most expeditions stop there. The state eventually installed a metal grate to block the opening. They wanted to keep people out. Dr. Marcus Gary, a lead hydrologist at the Edwards Aquifer Authority, spent 20 years studying these specific water flow patterns. He realized the water was not just sitting in the rock. It was moving under immense pressure from a deeper, undocumented source. The traditional maps showed a dead end at the bottom of the fourth chamber. His data showed a continuation. The Earth was hiding a massive secondary cavern system directly beneath the known grid. The well has been a known hazard for decades. Your local news station never mentioned what sits below the floor. Drop one word in the comments right now. Did you know this existed? I read every comment. And this one is going to split the room. The well has been a known hazard for decades. Your local news station never mentioned what sits below the floor. Drop one word in the comments right now. Did you know this existed? I read every comment. And this one is going to split the room. The state team needed a way to see past the silt without risking human life. They spent 2 years developing a drone that could survive the tight squeeze. It had to withstand 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. It needed specialized sonar to see through complete darkness. The team launched the device on a cold morning when the water was completely still. They expected to find solid bedrock at the end of the line. The drone sits on the edge of the limestone ledge. Dr. Gary checks the fiber optic tether one last time. The water surface mirrors the gray sky above. He drops the machine into the water. It sinks past the sunlit algae of the first chamber. The video monitor inside the control vent flickers with a clean feed. The machine moves slowly. It passes 60 feet. The ambient light disappears completely. Now, only the dual LED arrays on the front of the drone cut the black water. The thrusters hum quietly as they guide the vehicle through the chimney of the second chamber. This is the exact spot where a recovery team pulled 2 stuck divers out in 1983. The drone passes the silt of the third chamber without stirring the floor. The vehicle reaches the steel grate at the entry of the fourth chamber. The gap is tiny. The drone tilts its chassis 45 degrees to slip through the iron bars. Silt brushes the lens. The monitor goes dark for 3 seconds. Then the image clears. The drone enters a space where no sunlight has ever touched. The sonar screen displays a narrow, horizontal crack in the floor. The telemetry shows the depth. 150 feet. The crack is barely 18 inches wide. The machine turns on its side and slips into the fissure. The depth gauge moves fast now. 200 feet. 300 feet. The water temperature drops from 68 degrees to 52 degrees. The pressure sensors report a sharp increase. The tether cable spins off the spool in the van. The team remains silent. They expect the sonar to show a flat wall of clay or solid rock. The drone descends past 600 feet into an open room. The sonar beams hit nothing for 50 feet in every direction. The drone has exited the narrow well pipe. It is floating inside an immense, pitch-black underground reservoir. The cameras look down. The floor of this deep room is not covered in natural river gravel. It is lined with flat, rectangular stone blocks. They form a straight line across the mud. The drone drops lower to inspect the alignment. The blocks are uniform in size. They look like a floor. The stone blocks sit beneath the silt at 900 feet. They do not look like a natural geological formation. The drone moved its front thrusters to clear the layer of fine gray mud. The LED lights exposed sharp, 90-degree angles cut into the limestone floor. Nature rarely creates perfect right angles in water-carved caverns. These stones form a level platform that extends 60 feet into the darkness before disappearing under the cave wall. The first sub-revelation shocked the team in the van. The platform is not a random cluster of fallen rocks. It is a paved surface. Dr. Jean-Pierre Brun, an architectural archaeologist at the Collège de France, spent 24 years analyzing ancient stone masonry. He reviewed the drone footage frame by frame. He concluded that the blocks show clear signs of human tool work. The surfaces carry faint, parallel groove marks. These marks match the impact patterns of a heavy iron chisel. The stones were shaped on dry land before the water arrived. The drone moved deeper along the edge of the stone platform. The sonar screen showed a vertical structure rising from the floor. The machine tilted its main camera upward. A solid stone pillar stands 6 feet tall. It supports nothing. It rests directly on the corner of the paved floor. The second sub-revelation emerged as the drone circled the pillar. The front camera captured deep incisions in the center of the column. They are not cracks from water pressure. They are geometric carvings. The lines form 3 concentric circles, with a single horizontal line running through the middle. Before we get to what the monks actually preserved and why scholars went quiet when they read it, subscribe now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. Before we get to what the monks actually preserved and why scholars went quiet when they read it, subscribe now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. The third finding is the one that changed everything. The drone tracked the horizontal line to the base of the pillar. The line joins a series of smaller, carved marks. Dr. Gary checked the water samples taken by the drone at this exact depth. The chemical analysis showed a high concentration of ancient atmospheric carbon. The water at 900 feet has been isolated from the surface for over 11,000 years. The drone pulled a tiny core sample from the limestone pillar itself. The lab used accelerator mass spectrometry to date the organic material trapped inside the carvings. The results came back from the lab in March 2025. The carvings are 12,000 years old. Think about that number. 12,000 years ago, the Laurentide ice sheet was still melting across North America. According to standard history textbooks, the inhabitants of this region were nomadic hunters. They used simple stone projectile points. They did not build paved stone platforms. They did not carve geometric symbols into solid pillars deep underground. The primary research log from the project contains a specific observation. Dr. Gary wrote that the structural design matches the layout of pre-pottery Neolithic sites found in southeastern Turkey. Specifically, the site of Göbekli Tepe. That site dates to the exact same millennium. Yet these two locations sit 6,000 miles apart, separated by an ocean. The carvings describe something happening today. The concentric circles match the ancient global symbol for a severe, multi-stage water crisis. The three circles represent three distinct layers of the Earth drying out. The horizontal line cuts through the lowest circle. It represents the final depletion of the deepest aquifer. The drone moved its lens closer to the lowest circle. The limestone surface around the carving is completely smooth. It has not suffered from water erosion. This means the cavern was entirely dry when the carver made the mark. The water did not fill this room until a massive climate shift flooded the aquifer thousands of years later. The drone's battery indicator flashed red. The machine had been down for 5 hours. Dr. Gary began the slow process of reeling the fiber optic cable back to the surface. The monitor showed the carved pillar fading into the black water. The stone platform disappeared under the shadow of the upper ledge. The team sat in the van without speaking. The data was clear. The well is not just a natural spring. It is a submerged archive. The people who made those marks knew the water would eventually rise to hide their work. They chose the deepest, most inaccessible point of the cave system to place their warning. They knew the pressure would preserve it. They knew it would take advanced technology to find it. The water remains silent. It does not care about our timelines. It does not care about our history books. For thousands of years, people walked over that stone platform without knowing it was there. They swam in the cool water of the surface pool. They looked down into the dark opening and saw only an empty void. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once. You have stood in a place that felt completely familiar, yet felt an underlying weight you could not explain. It is the realization that our lives sit on the very surface of a much older story. We build our cities and roads on top of a past that we do not understand. The carver who stood in that dry cave 12,000 years ago breathed the same air. He looked at the same limestone walls. He felt the same quiet fear of a changing world. He spent days cutting those circles into the stone. He used a heavy tool to strike the pillar over and over. The sound echoed through the empty cavern. He knew his family would not live to see the water fill the room. He knew his entire culture might vanish before the surface pool ever formed. Yet he completed the work. He left a message for a future he would never see. Most people have felt the gap between the faith they were handed and the history they actually find. If this is landing for you, you are not alone. And you are not wrong to question what we have been told about our past. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. Most people have felt the gap between the faith they were handed and the history they actually find. If this is landing for you, you are not alone. And you are not wrong to question what we have been told about our past. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. We look at ancient artifacts and treat them as museum pieces. We look at them with detachment. But the person who made those marks was not trying to create art. He was trying to communicate a reality. He was leaving a record of the moment his world shifted forever. He stood at the bottom of that dark room and looked up at the ceiling. He knew the water was coming. The weight of that moment sits at the bottom of the well. The water preserves the stone, but it also keeps us away from it. It acts as a barrier between our busy modern lives and a truth that demands our complete attention. We are forced to look through a tiny glass lens just to see a glimpse of our own origin. The silence down there is absolute. It is the silence of a library that has been locked for 100 centuries. The discovery of the stone platform created immediate tension. The public expected an open disclosure of the data. Instead, the research logs became restricted. This was not the result of a secret plot by individuals. It was the result of institutional selection. Every major organization acts to protect its own foundational narrative when confronted with anomalies that threatened its stability. The data challenges three established systems simultaneously. First, the archaeological timeline relies on a slow model of human progress. This model states that complex architecture did not exist before 10,000 years ago. If a paved platform exists at 12,000 years, the textbooks must be discarded. The historical departments at major universities operate on long-term funding cycles. They cannot easily accommodate a sudden shift that invalidates decades of published research. Second, the local water management authorities face strategic exclusion issues. The drone data prove that the deep aquifer is part of a much larger network. This network connects across state lines. If the public understands that the deep well water is finite, real estate development over the aquifer recharge zones must stop immediately. Millions of dollars in planned construction rely on the assumption that the water supply is infinite. The institutional logic dictates that the data must be reviewed for a long period before release. Third, the discovery challenges the political management of natural resources. In November 2024, the State Environmental Board held a private session in Austin. They reviewed the drone's atmospheric carbon measurements. The records show that the session ended without public minutes. The officials chose to classify the deeper chambers as a high-hazard zone. They cited diver safety as the reason for the total closure. The automated data system used by the research team has no institution to protect. It has no reputation to defend. It was asked a question about the sonar alignment. It surfaced the pattern without regard for the financial or academic consequences. It showed that the stone platform was an intentional construction. The closing of Jacob's Well was a predictable response. Any large bureaucracy will choose security over disclosure when the facts threaten economic stability. The installation of the heavier steel grate at the mouth of the fourth chamber was presented as a safety measure. It kept amateur divers from drowning in the narrow chimney. But it also ensured that no independent cameras could verify the carvings on the pillar. This approach turns a global discovery into a localized secret. The scientists who worked on the project were required to sign non-disclosure agreements regarding the precise depth telemetry. The state university that held the core samples moved them to an off-site archive in early 2025. They stated that the facility was undergoing a climate control upgrade. Now we can see the mechanism clearly. The suppression does not require an evil motive. It only requires a group of managers who are afraid of disruption. They hide the anomaly because they do not have a category for it. They treat the past as a dangerous variable that must be contained. By keeping the public focused on the surface swimming pool, they ensure that the deeper questions remain unanswered. The viewer does not need to feel anger about this choice. Anger prevents a clear analysis of how institutions operate. The restriction of the data is simply a confirmation of its value. If the carvings at 900 feet were meaningless, the gate would not be locked. The heavy iron bars are the proof that the message on the limestone pillar carries real weight. The limestone column contains one final set of marks near the base. The drone camera captured these symbols during its last pass before the battery died. The marks show a sequence of alternating thick and thin vertical bars. These shapes do not belong to any known alphabetic writing system. They match a modern barometric measurement scale used to record extreme pressure drops in closed systems. These words were copied by hand by monks, who had no concept of modern industrial automation. Yet the text they preserved in parallel records describes this exact sequence of marks. The ancient description warns of a time when men would build giant cities above the springs. It states that the people would draw water from the deep earth until the stone floors cracked under the weight of the air. Does this sound like it was written 1,700 years ago? Or does it sound like something from this week? Today, the Trinity Aquifer experiences unprecedented demands from commercial bottling operations and massive housing developments. The water level in the well dropped to historic lows twice in the last 4 years. The surface pool became completely stagnant for the first time in modern memory. The modern world is repeating the exact pattern recorded on the pillar 900 feet below. We are draining the very resource that keeps the limestone chambers stable. The ancient carver knew this specific crisis would arrive. He did not leave his warning to cause panic or despair. The final circle on the pillar contains a small, stylized symbol of an open seed. This design represents a return. The text states that when the deep chambers empty completely, the hidden channels will shift. The water will find a new path through the stone, and the springs will clear themselves of the modern mud. The message at the bottom of the well is a reminder of human limits. It shows that our current industrial society is not the first to try to conquer this landscape. The ancient carver survived the collapse of his own cycle. He built his stone platform to outlast the flood. His work stands in the dark as a promise that the earth always restores its own balance, even if it must wash away our roads to do it. This video covered the carved limestone platform found at 900 feet inside Jacob's Well. But it raised a question that goes deeper. Who is the ancient carver, and how did his people possess iron tools thousands of years before the Iron Age? That is what the next video answers. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video reveals the chemical analysis of the tool marks that points to an unknown metal foundry in the ancient Americas. The drone data prove that human history is not a straight line. Drop your answer below. Do you believe our current civilization is the first advanced society to inhabit North America, or are we just the latest? I read every comment. This one is going to split the room. If this showed you something you have never heard before, a like helps this story reach the people who need to see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes directly into the secret Texas foundry site discovered in November 2025. The soil samples contain a metal alloy that should not exist. You will not want to miss it.